Now, without any further delay, coming to tonight's session on an experienced designer in a product manager's body. Let me give you an introduction to a very distinguished eminent speaker, Phillip Golub. Phil is a seasoned executive creative director and product manager focused on design thinking and service and product innovation with over 23 years of experience. He is a creative leader who promotes design thinking-led approaches to clients and partners' ongoing business transformation challenges, including branding, mobility, digital product innovation, service design, and cognitive experiences. Phil also is the co-host and co-founder of the What Bubbles Up podcast, a show about ideas, where they come from, the process people take to get there, and how to know when they truly are great ideas. Phil currently serves as Senior Director, Digital Products at a leading big box retailer of alcohol beverages and accessories. Previously, he has served as Head of Experience for the South region of Publicis Sapient, where he led over 100 creative professionals across 6 primary disciplines in the creation of transformational digital experiences for the world's foremost brands. A very warm welcome to you, Phil. We are absolutely thrilled to have you here with us tonight. Handing the session over to you now.
Great. Thank you so much, Shama. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you okay. Now I'm going to stop sharing my screen so you can share your presentation.
Wonderful. I'll turn on my video as well. Or can I turn on my video?
Please turn on your video. We insist.
Okay. It says I can't start because the host has stopped it. So I'm not sure if I'm doing something wrong here.
Let me check. Give me a minute. Can you try now?
I'm not being successful, I'm afraid. You can't start your video because the host has stopped it. But maybe if I start to share, that may solve it. Let me bring my screen up.
Right.
And maybe that will solve the issue.
I think now you can, Philip.
Yes, it's looking pretty good. All right. Hello, world. How's everyone doing this evening? All right. Thank you so much for that wonderful intro, Shama. I really appreciate it. I'm going to go full screen on my keynote presentation. Hopefully everyone can see it okay. Shama, if at any point anyone has any issues, please let me know and I will pivot accordingly.
Sure. I'll do that.
All right. So I think the proper greeting is to say good evening to you all. I am joining you from the suburbs of Washington, D.C. in the United States. So it is 10:40 a.m. my time, and I assume somewhere in the 8 p.m. range in IST. If anyone is joining us from anywhere else around the world, good afternoon, good evening, and or good night. Happy to be speaking with you about sort of my journey from the design realm into the product management realm. It is a journey that is taken on by quite a few people. There's definitely a kinship between UX and product management. And we're going to be talking about all of those things today. Well, first and foremost, once again, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you all. The IDPL reached out to me earlier in the summer to be a guest speaker, and I jumped at the opportunity. And so I'm really fortunate to be able to share my story with you all. Hopefully what I have to say will be, one, interesting, two, helpful, and of course, as we talk about a lot in the product world, valuable as you progress in your careers as product managers and leaders of digital experiences. As Shama already sort of went through, I've been doing this a really long time. Unfortunately, I'm no longer a young man. I started in this business when I was 19 years old. Started with some friends of mine while I was still in college with a small boutique agency called the Meticulous Design Group, self-taught in HTML and design. And that was in the mid to late 90s when the web was just becoming a thing. It's around that time that JavaScript enabled so many things like shopping carts and client-side application development. You name it, That was just, we were just literally kids in a candy shop at that time. But in the intervening 23 years, I feel like my greatest contribution to this community is to really give back and share all the things that I've learned over that period of time. And I've done a lot of things. I've worked in a lot of industries. But right now, in addition to my role as a product manager with a leading retailer, as Shama mentioned, it's my great joy and honor to have created this podcast called What Bubbles Up, because no matter what you do, if you're in business, you're in the business of ideas. And so these conversations that we have with experts are really about the process of generating ideas, vetting those ideas, bringing them into the world, and making sure that they are providing meaning and value to clients and stakeholders alike. So what I want to accomplish here, hopefully in the next 30 minutes or so, is really talk about three primary things. One, how does a designer become a product manager? And is there really a difference between those two things? And you'd be shocked to learn there isn't a whole lot of it, but there are just different strengths and weaknesses that designers can call upon in a product management role. And in doing so, there's some tips and tricks, some processes, some methodologies that I employ that hopefully you can as well, into making sure that your MVPs, as you will, are stacked up the right way and are prioritized accordingly. And then what is a superpower? If you're a designer or have a design background and you're now in the world of product management, is it an advantage or is it detriment? And spoiler alert, I think it's not just an advantage, but an unfair one, in as much as broad-based thinking is really the item of the day. So what's in a name? Well, over my 23-year career, I've held a lot of titles. Senior creative consultant, information architect, group creative director, head of experience, service designer, you name it. It all bubbles up to this larger notion of user experience design, the creation of a greater, more meaningful, more deeper relationship between a consumer and a brand, between a service offering and the person who is consuming it. And that is essentially what a user experience designer does, but that's also what product managers do as well. It takes broad-based thinking. It takes multidisciplinary approaches. It takes system approaches to thinking about this notion of value and how to bring a product or a service to life. So it's not a very difficult transition in actuality to go from UX to product, in as much as today, in today's world, they are intrinsically linked, because technology is the thing that really supports all of these products and experiences. And as I've progressed in my career, the aperture has only grown and grown and grown in terms of the things I need to think about. When I was a hardcore designer, it was all about brand. It was all about aesthetics. It was all about, reinforcing the mission, right, of what a company purports to do. And then I realized, I really need to know technology really well in order to understand how to bring these ideas to life. Because, what I like to say is technology is all about what you know. Design is all about what you don't know. And in between is the magic. But then you have this third tranche of strategy, which is what's going to bring the most value. What does a product market fit? Where do these things really reside in the marketplace that people would actually have a chance of, engaging in and wanting to be a part of? And what should a company embark on that's going to bring the most, return on the investment? And so as I've grown my skill set, I'm realizing just how much of an overlap it is between design and product, because product managers have to do the exact same thing as well. Now, depending on your background, you're going to anchor to different parts of the product management equation more so than others. So what else have I learned as I've progressed in my journey? How has my aperture changed and expanded, and how has my focus shifted as I progress? Well, now I'm going to be painting with a broad brush for the next few slides, but for all intents and purposes, if you come from an agency world, and you're working on not just products, but also sort of marketing and communication, you're going to be focused on this notion of the big idea. What is this big sort of aha thing that you're going to, wow everyone with? That's great. That's wonderful. But advertising is all about the big idea. But when you're creating products, it's all about need and value, and sort of that Venn diagram, that overlap that I'm going to get to in a subsequent slide of needs and business goals, and that's going to produce the best result. In fact, designers and product managers are no longer in the business of being the arbiter of taste, right? The arbiters of taste are our users. They're going to tell us either passively or actively if something is or is not working. And so from that perspective, the old world is divergence at all costs. To the idea, must we all be faithful? And it's really, creative directors have an outsized role, almost as the primary arbiter of taste or need or value or what have you, because the anchor point is to the idea. But product world, data should dictate everything. All of these notions sort of go hand in hand. The truth is in the data. The truth is in what users tell us is useful or valuable, and the net return on that investment. And of course, again, shifting from what looks gorgeous and beautiful as your sole pursuit to the shift to value. What is going to be the most valuable? What's going to produce the most value for the user, produce the most value to the business? And that's something that we call a value exchange. And I'm going to be talking about that in this next section here. So product leadership today. Now, again, my journey into product management is pretty recent, but here's where I see product leadership kind of moving, again, from a designer's point of view. And I anchor back to this quote that I've been using over and over again over the years from Theodore Levitt, who is a world-renowned professor at the Harvard Business School. And back in 2006, this is 14 years ago now, he had this quote: "People don't want to buy a quarter-inch drill. They want a quarter-inch hole." So this is basically, don't focus on the product, focus on the benefit of that product. Inverts the mission or the goal or the journey from how do we push this thing that we think is great to what do people want to get out of the relationship with us? And it's something we call the reframe. If you're reframing an opportunity through the lens of value and need, that's going to be a more interesting space to play. Because, take another CPG brand that focuses on sort of home improvement products. Well, you can tell me the measurements of the drill and how much torque it has and the material, but am I going to be a better craftsperson? Am I going to be able to have better memories with my kids as I build a treehouse or something like that? That's an inverse benefit statement that's going to help us prioritize features, functionality, things of that nature through the lens of value, and contextualize it with a bit of an emotional quadrant to the equation. That's not just about features and functionality and how many of those features can we push out? It's really about value. So this is the value exchange that we're talking about. And this is not revelatory stuff, right? This is stuff that we've seen a lot of. But what's important to a business is not always going to be what's important to a user. What's important to a business are going to be things like reducing costs, increasing spend. Maybe we're going to consolidate systems. We're going to re-platform, and our total cost of ownership of our platform is going to reduce as a result of that. Are we getting better performance on our platform? Are employees going to be retained for longer periods of time? And we reduce training costs. And of course, if you're a service provider, are we going to increase our levels of services as a result of taking on an initiative? But on the converse side, the value to user is going to be, do I have a meaningful relationship with this brand? Am I I'm going to increase speed, but I'm also going to, buy the things that are important to me. Are you meeting and or exceeding my expectations? Are you going to accomplish this notion of not making me think, not making me do, and making my life easier for me? Because right now, in this world that we live in, the most precious commodity is time. And depending on where you are in the world, there's going to be just different levels of time starvation. We actually sometimes refer to time in terms of currency, spending time, wasting time, saving time. This is the most precious commodity. And much of it is because we are so tethered to these things in our pockets that this is not just a conduit to the world, but it's a way to, maximize our time. Our time is the most precious thing. So I want to make sure that the time that I spend with your product, your service, your experience, your company is time well spent. And I'm going to appreciate the time. And you're going to maximize my time efficiency. So that's where the value exchange really lies. And that's the lens through which we should think about products. Now, this is something I'm sure you've all seen before many, many times, but I call it defining the new MVP. And it's also a way I think about my skill set and what I bring to the table versus what someone with a bit more of a technology focus or more of a strategy focus is going to bring to the table. We have these three primary spheres of influence when deciding what our most viable product is going to be. You have the desirability, right? What users want and need to meet their expectations. You've got viability, which is really all about product market fit. Is this product, this service, this experience going to fill a gap that currently exists in the market? Is it proven? Is it viable? Is it available today? If not, do we own the right to fill that gap? And is it going to get us return on that investment? Of course, feasibility is all about capability, what is technically and organizationally possible within the current constraints. Now, if I were to look at this and again, paint with a broad brush, I would say desirability is something that a designer would really want to push forward on. This is where designers love to live. I want to make it beautiful. I want to make it award-winning. I want people to really lust after this experience. Ability, I'm going to say this is probably where our strategists want to play. It's all about investment and return, product market fit, and of course, is this a space that we can play? And I would say, again, generally speaking, feasibility is where our technologists play. And I would also venture a guess that the vast majority of people going into the realm of product management have more of a technology focus. And an MVP in terms of viability is really a byproduct of scope. How much time do we have and how much stuff can we fit in that time box? And that's, really whether you come from a design background or a product background, that overlap, that true Venn diagram that takes all of those considerations in play is, where the magic lies. And it's really, again, about this notion of value. Are we achieving an exchange of value that helps our customers, our users, and gets a return on investment for our business and accomplishes our KPIs and OKRs? So the reframe here is go from minimum viable product to minimum valuable product. And that means scope has to shift a little bit. If we're going to focus on things that are going to provide the most value, we think about that 4-up of, quick wins, strategically viable, but more complex, strategically viable, but less complex. And then there's just too hard and there's no return. Those quick wins are pretty much no brainers, but it's really those other two squares that we want to play, that something that may be less complex, but equally viable. We may want to deprioritize that for something that might be a little more complex, but is going to net more net return on investment for the user's time and for the business. And that's where I think there's a transition happening. So trying to speed along here a little bit, but let's talk about some tips and tricks, some method to the madness that I believe I've successfully employed in the past. And the first thing I wanted to kind of bring up is I'm a big advocate of Simon Sinek. If you're not familiar with Simon Sinek, he's a British-born American author and motivational speaker. One of his books was called Start With Why. And he talks about this notion of the golden circle, where any strategic pursuit, whether it be, a feature, a service, a product, or a brand, a lot of times companies or product managers or whomever start with the what and the how. You're chasing parity on a feature by feature basis with your competitors. But really his notion is, what is the reason for doing something? Is it in keeping with our brand? Is it in keeping with our mission? And so, again, because teams often start here, they miss something that's, I think, pretty fundamental, which is sort of that, sort of an inside out approach to understanding, what is our reason to believe? And then we pull a red thread from that into everything from opportunity spaces to initiatives to epics to features to stories, and then sort of plot your course accordingly. And it is a long red thread, but a thread nonetheless that connects back to the notion of purpose, which I think really resonated with me because of my background as a designer. This is a notion I will play on again later on. And so when I'm thinking about these types of things, not sure if everyone is familiar with this notion of the double diamond. This comes out of Stanford D School methodologies. It is a way of thinking about problem solving in a rapid way. And most projects, when you think about it, are much more than double diamonds. There's usually like tens, if not hundreds of diamonds, because each tip of the diamond, it represents sort of a pivot point. It's basically a representation of what have we learned and how does our aperture consideration set change as a result of what we've learned, so that we can then narrow the aperture and converge around a set of ideas that we know are going to be viable, visible, and valuable. So you start from a point of understanding, a hypothesis. You go broad to gather more inputs to really test that hypothesis. Once you've learned something, either based on market research, primary user research, feasibility, what have you, whatever from those three circles that we talked about makes sense here, we then pivot back and then narrow our aperture. And we do that as many times as we need to get to a point of truth and something that's manageable in order to get to that all important and precious MVP. And so a process that I've employed, taking that double diamond approach and scaling it out, is I'm sort of cheekily calling the double diamond double click, because you can essentially lay a project plan on top of this to get to a point of sort of three tranches of activity that will get you to a point where you can sort of go off to the races and start to build stuff. There's a couple of ways to do this. Right now we're in a mode of let's build something, let's prototype it and test it in the market, see what we've learned, and then scale it out. I tend to do that in that second tranche, which is the shape. But I think even before that, from a design thinking sort of approach, I'm a big fan of the hunt, because you want to know what your opportunity spaces really are before you know where to play and start building. So I kind of chop it up into these three parts: hunt, shape, and sprint. Now the rest, there are slides of this deck that kind of talk about each and every step of this process. And I do not believe we have time to go through all of that. But essentially, all those notions of finding value and running with that is really where this process kind of takes shape. Now, I don't have a slide for it, but I'm just going to talk about it really briefly. I have a four-part framework that's separate from hunt, shape, sprint. And I call it the EOVC rules of engagement. EOVC stands for the following: empathy, opportunity, value, capability, and in that order. So empathy piece, as you can probably discern, is all about that notion of user need that you can see at the top of that first diamond. What are people longing for that we are not currently providing? Where are their pain points? Where are their unmet needs, either implicit or explicit? That therein lies the truth of what we attach ourselves to get something that's valuable and viable and visible. We then overlap that with the business goals, right? That's that value exchange. You see those overlapping circles in the middle of that first diamond. That's the empathy piece that leads into opportunity. If we know what we want to achieve and we know what our users need, there's areas of opportunity that we know we need to pursue, right? An opportunity could be as large and broad as contactless payment, or even bigger than that, convenience. We want to make sure this thing is as convenient as possible. That's an opportunity space within which live opportunities, and then at a lower level of granularity, initiatives that we can then prioritize and carve out in a sprint plan. But then it's the notion of value, right? Everything needs a business case. Design thinking doesn't always go back to value, but is this going to achieve our KPIs and OKRs? Is it going to be what is the cost of doing it, and what do we get in return for that? And that'll help with the prioritization as well. And then capability. Capability is everything from what platforms, what features and functions, what supporting sort of backstage components do we need in order to support and make manifest those opportunities that are of greatest value, mutual value, right? It could be anything from a new UI component all the way down to we need an entirely new payment platform. That's what I talk about capability. And also it's about people, right? Who do we need to hire in order to make sure that we can make these things happen, right? That's the EOVC sort of rules of engagement. And you find that out through this process of the double diamond, double click. Now, for the sake of time, I'm not going to go through the entirety of all of those slides that go through each of those in great detail. But one of the things that I've learned, and hopefully I've been successful in jumping the slides here. One thing that I've learned is, again, when you're talking about design in the world of product, after you've landed on your opportunities, your initiatives, and then your features, your epics, and your sprints, how do you move with speed? And it used to be that from a design handoff standpoint, your source of truth were annotated wireframes. That is not a world we live in anymore. We live in a world where the greatest, in my opinion, linchpin between good and great products and experiences is actually your front-end developer. And the reason why is because we see a difference in front-end development versus back-end. I am in the camp of believing that there is the myth of a full-stack developer. I know they exist. I've met them. I know them. But there are skill sets that are required in a product-driven world that are driven by this notion of what I'm calling experience engineers. They are the better bridge between design and development. Because ultimately, when we're hiring a team, we're building out a team, we want to create empathy of our own for how people work and what information they need and when. And so I'd like to get full stack product designers who, ideally know everything from strategy down to code, ideally. And then your back-end engineers know the platform, know the frameworks really, really well. But your experience engineers are the ones who are going to codify the ideas into usable code that can then be into which data and the capabilities of the platform could be integrated. And just super quick, there's sort of the front of front end and the back of front end. Your presentation engineers are really about HTML and CSS. Your application engineers are really doing more around JavaScript. It's not better, it's not worse, it's just a different focus because your presentation engineers are really concerned with layout. Layout and your CSS are where that desirability quotient really goes sky high. If it looks good and it behaves the way I want it to or expect it to, chances are I'm going to come back for more. So you can have a wonderful, amazing platform capability and logic, but if it doesn't look and behave the way I expect it to, it's potentially going to be a point of friction, if not failure. And so I'm a big proponent of atomic design. Atomic design is a term that was coined by a guy by the name of Brad Frost. He's based in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, here in the United States. And he's partnered very closely with another guy by the name of Dan Mall. Brad Frost and Dan Mall are really sort of key contributors to the community of atomic design and the creation of design systems. Because yes, eventually you will build a whole page and design a whole page. But what you're really talking about is, atoms, molecules, and organisms that can be combined together in a myriad of ways to create whole pages. And so what we want to do is provide a UI kit, which are these little granular pieces of UI, your font styles, your hex values, your CTAs, your images, your cards, what have you, and have a code snippet that attaches to each one of those things. Why? Because that is now your source of truth. Your design system is your source of truth, because all the time that is spent saying, oh, what is the hex value of our primary CTA? Or what is the expected behavior for this particular component? Those are already codified for you in a design system, and by extension, a design system manager. And there's a lot of them that are out there, things like Fractal or Envision DSM or Storybook is another one. This is where you get speed and quality at the same time. You don't have to sacrifice one for the other. And that's why I say your experience engineer, your front-end developer, is the most important part of your Scrum team at this point, because that's where the speed lies. And hopefully your designer is thinking like a developer, and your developers are thinking about the user. And that's, again, where that value can be found. And you're going to get an accelerated development timelines. You're going to get greater collaboration between design and engineering. And you're going to really be able to go from idea to execution faster, so that double diamond, that double click, you're going to hopefully, truncate that, significantly as you build out. Now, the unfair advantage. And I think I've successfully gone through this presentation with a lot of speed. Why do I think designers have an unfair advantage in the product world? Well, as the course descriptor, I think, accurately pointed out, it's going to look really good. You're going to know if you're a designer. Your padding, your stacking, your QA process is going to be a little bit more focused on, does this look the way it looks, and not necessarily just saying, did it meet the acceptance criteria in Jira, right? That's one sort of surface level benefit. But I think a larger pursuit, a larger consideration is this notion of brand. I sort of brought it up earlier in the conversation. And I would venture to guess that when I say the word brand, a lot of people are thinking colors, fonts, image guidelines, the way it looks. And that is certainly one aspect of brand. But there is a much, much bigger opportunity when thinking about brand. Brand is really at that very top of the strategic pyramid, in the sense that it is the mission upon which this company, this product, this service, this experience holds dear. It is what we call the reason to believe. It is a reason to believe not just in a product, service, or experience, but in the company that provides it. And so I have this adage that I love to use over and over, that a brand is a promise, but experience is proof. Okay. No user is really going to know what your backlog looks like. They're not going to know exactly what your capability stack looks like. They're not exactly going to know how flexible your presentation framework is, but they are going to know the extent to which you deliver on the promise that you make as a company, as a brand. And designers by and large, and I'm again painting with a broad brush, but designers by and large are the ones who sometimes have to come up with that mission, have to come up with that brand story, that purpose. But they have to, at least at a very bare minimum, anchor to it, and it manifests itself through the design. The design itself is not the brand, but the reason to believe is. And the experiences, the services, the products that we provide is really the proof and the extent to which we can deliver on that promise. And so what I'm going to take you through is this notion that comes from, it's really a Japanese concept that maybe you've seen before. Now, as you can see, I'm a big fan of circles, and hopefully by the end of this presentation, I'll come full circle back to this notion of an experienced designer in the body of a product manager. There's really these sort of four overlapping circles of sort of the reason to get up in the morning, right? And let's start with the four bigger circles. The first is what you love, right? What are the things that you hold dear? What is the mission that you embark on? That you really just it's something that you have a deep abiding love for. It could be a capability. It could be sort of a tranche of work. It could be the services and products that a particular company provides. It could be any number of things. This is what you truly love. This is what you're good at. This other circle on the left. This is about skill, right? You love something, but you may not actually be good at the things that you love doing. Like, I love music. I used to be a musician. If I were to pick up a saxophone right now, I probably wouldn't be very good at it because I'm completely out of practice. But these are the things that you can do really well. Then you get, sort of like, let's be real here. These are sort of if it were a brand pyramid, these would be sort of the rational benefits of being with a brand. This is what I can get paid for. These are the things that I have sort of, there's viability in the marketplace for my skill set. And, I can get paid for it. Side note, I went to school and got a major in government and a minor in drama. So you can imagine my surprise upon graduation when none of the big government and drama companies were hiring, right? Why? Because obviously nothing like that exists. So I developed a different skill set that could have my own market viability. And then it's, of course, need. This is a little bit more around product market fit, but it's also, what does the world need, right? What is missing in the world that I can possibly contribute to through the work that I do? These are sort of the four like uber spheres of consideration when thinking about why do I get up in the morning. Love, skill, paid, what can I get paid for, and what the world needs. Then there's another level, right? Which is sort of where these things overlap. You start to get some secondary considerations, right? What you love and what you're good at, well, that's something you can have passion for, right? I'm not going to give any examples. That's for each individual to sort of discern on their own. But that's where passion lies. And then you have the overlap of skill and viability in the market from a payment standpoint. And that's what you choose to do for a living, right? Can I do it and can I get paid for it? That's my profession. That's the job I will choose to do because, it's simply low-hanging fruit from a career standpoint. Then the overlap between what the world needs and what I can get paid for is my vocation, right? It is the things that I believe I am particularly geared for. It's like if you were to say, I was made for this, that's where that overlap lies. And of course, between love and need is mission. That's where there's a course of action that must be taken in order to fulfill a goal. And that is my mission. And I'm going to have love for it because I know the world needs it. Now, there's an anti-pattern here, which is the rest of the overlap. And wherein passion lies, and it sort of helps with what your profession is, there's satisfaction, but maybe you feel somewhat useless, maybe because you're not mission driven, or maybe because it's not necessarily what the world needs, but you can get paid for it. Conversely, where profession and what you can get paid for and what you're skilled at, well, you know what? I'm comfortable, but I'm not necessarily fulfilled. I'm sure we can all relate to things like this, right? But then on the other side, you've got this overlap of mission and vocation. And that's, it gives me excitement. I'm doing something meaningful. I'm doing something that's going to help the world out. But we don't know if we fulfill that need, does the need exist anymore? And so is there uncertainty that comes with that? And then lastly, the overlap of mission and love and vocation and of course need. There's certainly delight. I'm doing something that's making me happy. That's mission driven, but maybe there's no money in it. And there's nothing wrong with that, but that's a consideration for some people. So now we have all these overlapping concerns. And so why do I talk about brand when I'm talking about something like this? Well, it's this notion of what the Japanese call ikigai. Ikigai is a reason for being. And, it's why am I on this earth? How am I helping my family? Am I doing something that's meaningful, that's viable, that's valuable, that people will see, that people will care about? What's my legacy? That's what ikigai sort of captures. And so why does this matter when you're talking about brand? Because if a brand is a reason to believe, and ikigai is a reason for being, I think a designer has an unfair advantage because they really thrive not so much on completion of tasks, but on, just sort of this notion of community, being part of something larger than themselves, and putting that out in the universe for someone to consume. And, it doesn't hurt that you get some name recognition for it. It certainly doesn't hurt that you can get paid for it. But as we start to put these features and products and experiences in the marketplace, there's that high level pursuit, which is, I know I'm doing something that's meaningful, that's valuable, and it's going to make me believe that I'm doing the right thing and I'm part of something larger than myself. And so that brings me to sort of these three key pillars of pursuit, which is, why do I believe that an experience designer or a designer can thrive in a product world? Well, it's really up to them. As long as they pursue these three things. Do you have passion? Do you have purpose? And are you working with people that you trust and admire, and know that they're part of the mission that you seek to pursue? And through community and purpose, all things are really possible. And that's very meta, but it's also the reason why I think this transition is the right thing at the right time, because I don't see them as mutually exclusive pursuits. I actually see it as being integral to the success of products, services, experiences, and by extension, brands. So with that actually concludes my presentation. And we've got about 10 minutes. Shama, should we open it up to questions?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for the amazing insights, Phil. Great content. So yes, let's begin with the Q&A then. I encourage the audience to ask your questions in the Q&A section or on the LinkedIn channel. Phil, we have 2 questions already lined up for you. If you could see in the Q&A.
Let me get out of here and
get
into that. Whoops. Tell you what, just to save on time, why don't you read them out for me? I'm having a little difficulty grabbing them.
Sure, I will do that, but you will have to stop sharing your screen so that I can share.
Now I got it.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, so the first question is from Shruti. She says, hey Phil, do you have any trusted go-to frameworks for defining MVPs, which will cater to business, design, tech, and ensure the first release of a product in a doable within the timeline and budget?
Sure. It's a longer answer, but essentially, what I have is a framework that has been used many times around sort of value versus complexity. So at a high level, when you're on your hunt and you've identified opportunities that are derived from empathy and provide value and lead to a capability, you then break those opportunities down into specific initiatives. Those initiatives are sort of can be cobbled together to create whole projects, or it can be drilled down upon to create specific epics and stories that can be groomed. But before you do any of that, you want to there's an opportunity prioritization matrix that I have that takes all the opportunities and initiatives, lists them, and has a scoring methodology around, hey, is it going to be strategically valuable? and is it going to be complex? And then you calculate what the aggregate scoring of that opportunity or initiative is, and then you put it up on that 4-up, whether it's a quick win, strategic and not very complex, strategic and complex, and then not strategic and complex. And then you sort of plot that on a roadmap, and then drill down from there. But it really starts with, do you have a sense of what the return on that investment is? Do you know all the predecessors and dependencies for each of those opportunities and initiatives? And also, what's really great about this is it builds consensus. And you want to make sure that all your stakeholders, all the people who are part of making that product a reality, are part of that process. And that aggregate scoring, it's really sort of a contract across silos. That yes, this is our strategy. Strategy is nothing more than a plan, and hopefully you've got the order of operations correct in achieving it. That process though is probably a 4-hour class unto itself. So that's the best I can do under time frame.
Got it. So our next question is from Alok. He says, "Hi Philip, how do you keep an efficient communication between different teams? Because at the end of the day, right communication solves what we want to achieve from different teams. How did you find a bigger picture when you say values, purpose, and principles working with the organization being in product management?"
Well, not to cop out here, but I do think it comes back to brand, and that's the very beginning of the process. Does it support the mission? Everything should be vetted through that lens. If you're working for a company that doesn't have a strong brand purpose, my advice would be to do that, because if you're just doing it for the sake of doing it, it's going to be hard to gain alignment, because nobody knows what the ultimate goal is, what the ultimate purpose is, or the promise that was made. And so, it's if nothing else, a vetting mechanism to gain alignment. Is this who we are? Does this represent who we are as a company? And go from there. Without it, it's going to be very subjective, and it's going to be either the most senior person has the most say, or it's going to be purely a byproduct of what can we fit in the sprint, or how much scope do we have, how much time do we have, and that's your arbiter of success or failure, which is not exactly going to provide necessarily all the user value that you want. So I would start with brand, and I would start with why.
Great. I hope that answers your questions, Alok. Phil, is it okay if we take 2 more questions? I mean,
absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So our next question is, what if you're a UX designer that doesn't have a traditional graphic design background and can't make things pretty?
Yes. So that's a great point. And there's 2 keys to success there, because if you look at the traditional job description for that, the UX designer's job is not to make things pretty. It's to make things functional. If you were if you were to say, I'm a visual designer or a product designer, I would say, okay, you have to make it functional and pretty. But if you're a UX designer and you're really anchored to, sort of what I call the boxes and arrows side of the design equation, then your job is to make it functional. And that actually may be an easier transition for you into the product realm, because the limitations and capabilities of the platform. You're working hand in hand with your product manager to comb through that backlog, and you know exactly what can and can't be built. So that's not a detriment at all. It could be a real value add. But I would definitely encourage you to partner with a visual designer who can make those ideas a reality, create a design system, and make sure that is your anchor point along with your front end code.
Great. Our next question is from Rishabh. Can you share some resources to look for in design for someone working in edtech with an engineering background and running everything as one-person company? And also he says, great session.
Oh, well, thank you for that. There's a couple of books that you should read, and a couple of people you should follow. Steve Krug wrote a book years ago called Don't Make Me Think. that goes back, probably 20 years. It's a book that I reference a whole lot, because what any product or service should do, as I mentioned, is keep people from making them think and making them do. Essentially, again, if people are time starved, which they are, your product, your service, your experience should be as efficient and easy to use as possible. And any time that I spend thinking or doing something that you could have done for me is time wasted. So read Steve Krug, Don't Make Me Think. And then again, read everything you can on design systems. Because if you have an engineering background, you could probably immediately see the benefit of atomic design. So definitely check out Brad Frost and Dan Mall. Dan Mall runs a company called Super Friendly. We're sort of Twitter connected. That's about the extent of it. And Brad Frost literally wrote the book on atomic design. And I think you'll see how that can gain a whole lot of efficiencies. And it's not necessarily about things that are beautiful. It's about things that can produce the most value in the shortest time frame. And I think that's where design and product really mesh really well.
We'll take this one last question, Phil.
Sure.
It's an interesting one. I'm a UX designer trying to move into product management. One problem I have is people don't think I'm technical enough. I can't code and don't know the tech stack enough. How can I position myself instead?
Design and strategy. You do want to know the platform. You try to bone up on things like headless architectures, like the microservices, micro front ends, React, Node, and Redux as a presentation framework. Just read about them. You don't have to know the ins and outs, and you don't have to code, but you want to know how to construct a design system and what kinds of things that design system should have to make development process quick and efficient. But where you may lack in technical knowledge, you can help sort of unite the team through the actual construction of the design itself and the strategic pursuits, everything from research to product market fit to just ways of working. Ideation processes, brainstorming methodologies, tool sets, things like cloud-based ideation platforms like Mural and Miro, design thinking methodologies like lean startup. There's a lot of things you can bring to the table that have nothing to do with code whatsoever. So don't believe the hype that if you don't know code, you're not affecting a positive change on your product team. You have a whole host of skills at your disposal that you can bring to bear every day. And I think as a designer, the biggest one of all is the power to unite and the power to make people believe in something bigger than themselves.
Great. Thank you so much, Phil. And thank you, audience, for the participation. But in view of the time constraints, we will have to end the Q&A here. But for any further questions, you can connect with Phil over LinkedIn or other mediums, if that's okay with you, Phil.
Sure. Yeah. Ping me.
Yeah. Great then.
Well, thank you so much for the time, and Shama and the Institute for Product Leadership. Really appreciate it, and look forward to seeing what you guys do with this knowledge.
Sure. We have enjoyed having you with us, Phil. It's been a complete pleasure. Please accept this certificate of appreciation from the Institute. So if you scan the QR code, it will take you to the recording of this session. We'll be sharing the recording on the YouTube channel as well. We are grateful for the time and effort you took to share your thoughts and amazing insights, Phil. I believe our audience can benefit immediately from the methods you suggested and get ahead in their career. Thank you once again.
Appreciate it. Thank you all. Have a wonderful evening.
Yes, and thank you, audience, for joining in. It was great interacting with you all. Do not forget to register for tomorrow's webinar. It's going to be yet another amazing session. So with that note, I end tonight's session. Have a good night. Thank you, Will.
Cheers.
Yeah.